Paul, thank you for being today here with us and for offering this teaching. I give now a word to you.
In these teachings, Sasha has initiated and maintained a container of awareness or consciousness. I will continue to endorse and support that container. And in this teaching, I will pay attention to the quality of the container. The container is what holds your experience. Your experience occurs within the container. Try to pay attention to the energy that you're experiencing, not from your computer, but directly from the container, and within the container, from me. I've said many times that I was trained in complete silence. So when I speak to you, it's my verbalization of what I know. And my verbalization has changed over the years as what I know has changed. So my third book is different from the first two. The first two are meant for people who have no background in anything other than conventional religion. So I think it's readable, and I've had a lot of information that supports my impression. My most recent book, which is now, it's almost a couple of years old by now. My most recent book is different. It's a very strong departure from the first two. It's written for people who actually have some familiarity and development with what's invisible, with what is hidden, what is mysterious, and what is unspeakable. So my task in writing this book and in talking with you is to discuss what's unspeakable. I want to emphasize that what I know, I didn't learn from words or from books. It's a way of learning that is not Western. This learning is very simple. It's based on you experiencing me so thoroughly that you learn how to imitate what I'm doing. Not what I'm saying, what I'm doing. there came a time when I had learned what there was to learn from my living teachers. And I had a strong sense that what I knew was very partial and limited, and I needed more teaching. I couldn't find living teachers. And what I was interested in wasn't in books. So what I did is what's traditional to do. I went on pilgrimage. For many years, I traveled over large parts of Latin America, Europe, and to some extent, Asia. I did not seek out living teachers. I went to tombs. I went to cemeteries. I went to reliquaries. I went to sacred places. And I would request a blessing. It's a very traditional request, a blessing. I requested a blessing after I offered a blessing. I offered something before I asked for anything. So I was initiating a reciprocity. And I was willing to be satisfied just offering something. There were many times that I waited an hour or a day or more for any kind of response. Oddly, I always had a response if I was patient. And I would continue to offer without trying to get anything, without any agenda or expectation. I was willing to say that I had made the journey simply to honor the saint or the place. When I say this to you, I have an awareness that you may not understand how important pilgrimage is now. Next time you read a report about the annual pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia, where people come from all over the world to visit a rock, you'll be reminded of the importance of pilgrimage. Millions of people have visited that rock, and tens of thousands continue to visit that rock every year. The same is true for the visit to the church at Compostela in Western Spain. Some years ago, I visited a rock in the southern Peruvian Andes. It was memorable. It was perhaps the first time that I had a strong teaching from a rock. There were perhaps 50, 60,000 people visiting that rock. And they do every year in the springtime. It didn't make any sense to me that I was receiving a teaching from a rock. It still doesn't make any sense to me. It'll never make any sense to me. How can I receive a teaching from a rock? The teaching, or if you will, blessing, because they're the same, was gifted to me at a moment that I remember as if it just happened this morning. That experience was complicated for me because I knew that no one was allowed to touch this rock. There were gatekeepers, and it was roped off. And the rope was lowered, and I was invited to touch the rock. And for years, it confused me about why I was invited to touch the rock, and no one was allowed to touch this rock. And finally, I just gave up and said, I have no idea why I was allowed to touch this rock. But I know what I learned. It's available to me as we speak. Where is it? It's not in my mind. I can't tell you verbally what the instruction was. It's a living part of what I offer. It lives within me, but it's not in my mind. I've had this experience visiting tombs, visiting sacred places where there are sarcophagus. Sasha and I recorded some of this on the website, on my website, under the heading Sacred Relics and Icons, or something like that. There's recordings of our visits to 5th and 6th century baptismal balls in Western Europe. These are unused. These are museum relics or of archaeological interest. And when I approached them, not because I was interested in the archaeology or the church history, I was simply interested in offering. And asking for a blessing. And you can see in the recording how I negotiate the reciprocity. There are no words, but you can watch the energy by simply experiencing the recording. And in experiencing the recording, you're learning how we do this. Doing this is part of our species inheritance. Our species has always gone to sacred places and had interactions with the sacredness of those places. It's part of our wiring. It's that you have to get out of the way because you know how to do this. It may take you a week or a year or a decade for this to awaken in you. Because in the West, as you know, our thoughts and concepts tend to dominate no matter what. I don't know how many years it took me to be able to do this fluently. I first started attempting this as a teenager and didn't get very successful. I didn't become fluent with this kind of interaction until into my 50s. I recorded it so you can imitate it. What I do with those icons is what you can do with any sacred place, whether it's a rock or a tomb. And what you get isn't necessarily what you want. Because if what you want is to heal or feel better or be a better person, that may not be what you get. What I got was how to be of more service, how to be more helpful, how to be more useful. Because you see, what's not understood in the West is that the sacred would like our help. The sacred has always needed our help. For Westerners, that's a radical or nonsensical assertion. Certainly, the great civilization of the ancient Maya is an example of spiritual practice whose purpose is to help the sacred. The Inca were the same. Much of the spirituality of the New World is of that quality. I find that when I say this, it is so outside the Western canon that it's hard to perceive that at all. And that, of course, is the point of or the subtext, if you will, of my first book, Activist Mysticism, where I raised this topic. I suggest that really what I'm doing is trying to be helpful. Oddly, what I discovered is that the more helpful I was, oddly, I became more spiritually developed so that I can become more helpful. So I've become more spiritually developed, not because that's my goal. It's that I'm trying to be useful. My second book, What Wants to Be Known, describes an effort that Sasha and I made over the course of about 10 years, which we usually just call the service project to give it a name, where we try to be helpful very specifically with specific issues. It's in the second book. It's all the conversation about the esoteric field and the light columns. I've recorded so much of this, so it's available for you to learn because it's available to be imitated. Remember that these recordings, which are all digital recordings, they're not like film. Film does not reproduce faithfully and fully and energetic, but digital recording, video recording, does faithfully produce the energetic. When I realized that years ago, it was during the time that video transformed from analog to digital. And with it, there came this internet and digital video cameras and DVDs, and all of this videotape was out. So we have a digital library of all of these service efforts for you to imitate. And no, you don't know how to imitate. But within your species level wiring, you know how to imitate. As you know, little children learn by imitation. How do they know this? How do they know how to imitate? It's in the wiring. You just have to bring back into your awareness what you knew as a child. Pardon me. In my third book, I'm reporting what happened, what it's like to step into the invisible world without wanting to get anything, without wanting to pursue any personal goal. It's the step into the invisible to help the invisible. So what I've learned is entirely without self-interest. And what I've learned is what this book is about. It's not what I've learned in Western terms. It's not a theology, and it's not a body of knowledge that can be debated or discussed or worshiped. It's just what it's like to be in this realm. What is it actually like? That's what the meat of this book is. It's a report. What was difficult and is still difficult is that none of this has words. So my words are always an approximation of experiences that I did not record in Western terms. There's no memory of having done this or gone here or experienced this or that. There's no memory. There's simply the living presence of the invisible in me. It's a living presence. And I can try to sometimes verbalize what that experience is of this living presence. And this recent book is an attempt to actually put it in paragraphs and chapters. So if you allow it, the book itself actually attempts to convey this living presence, as I do when I speak to you within the presence of this container. All during this half hour that I've been speaking to you, I'm emanating this living presence. It's not because I want you to look at me or worship me. That would be profoundly uncomfortable for me. It's because I want to invite you into the genuine experience of what the sacred is when you experience it without self-interest. I thank you for listening. All of my teachers, those who were visible and invisible, are alive to me. I hope in some sense they're alive to you. Thank you.